Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. Welcome to the webinar. This is Take a Stand, 2016 Colorado Legislation and Healthy Schools. My name is Karen Moldovan, and I'm the Regional Field Manager for Action for Healthy Kids here in Colorado. And we are really so pleased to partner with LiveWell Colorado to bring you this webinar today. We want to apologize in advance in case we have any technical difficulties during the session. There have apparently been some outages with Comcast around town, and so we're hoping that we don't get cut off inadvertently and have to scramble, but just be patient if that happens. So before we get started, I would like to review some logistics. Once you're linked in, you should see a control panel, usually on the right side of your screen, and you can use your telephone or speakers to listen to the presentation, but everybody's going to be muted so that we can avoid static and background interference. You'll see a dialog box at the bottom of your control panel. We encourage you to type questions into that box as we're going along, and we have a break or two planned to get them answered later in the presentation. If for any reason we don't get to it or don't have time, then we'll send you some answers via email following the webinar. We are recording it, so links to the recording and to the handouts will be sent out to you within 2 to 3 business days. So I'd like to give you just a little background on Action for Healthy Kids before I turn it over to our presenter today. Action for Healthy Kids is a national nonprofit. We really are devoted to creating healthier school communities, and we've been around and working on this nationally since 2002. We are made up of parents and teachers, school administrators, health professionals, and school wellness champions from many, many different walks of life. Our vision is that every kid is healthy, active, and ready to learn, and our mission is to mobilize school professionals, families, and communities to take those kinds of actions that are going to really lead to healthy eating and physical activity and healthier schools where kids are able to thrive. Our focus areas are increasing physical activity and improving nutrition. We offer school grants. We have school wellness programs, trainings, and technical assistance. And here in Colorado in particular, we really focus on engaging parents on school health teams through our Parents for Healthy Kids initiatives. And this webinar today is brought to you on behalf of our Parent Advisory Board, whose members really are very eager to learn more about policy and opportunities for advocacy. So we are so glad that you're joining us today, because it is just really, really important for parents and students and community members to get involved in the public policy process. Our legislators here in Colorado consider hundreds and hundreds of bills during each session, and it's really hard for them to understand all of them if they don't have help from us, help from the community. They want to hear from parents and teachers and community members a lot more than they want to hear from professionals in the nonprofit sector. Your stories carry a lot of weight. They get a lot of attention because they show how the issues really are impacting the people in their districts. And so when you're talking to them, we encourage you to make it personal, talk about your challenges, talk about your struggles, share things that are going on with your family's health that you feel comfortable sharing. And they can really use your stories then to build support for the different legislation that they're considering. So now I'm going to turn it over to today's presenter, and we are so pleased to have her with us today, Karen Moldovan from LiveWell Colorado. And in her role as Director of Policy at LiveWell, Karen engages advocacy groups, policymakers, and other stakeholders to develop and support policy strategies and system reforms that advance healthy eating and active living. Prior to her work with LiveWell, Karen served as Policy Director for the Colorado Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and before that she was a Peace Corps volunteer. So she's been around. We really consider ourselves lucky that she also serves as an expert advisor to the Colorado Action for Healthy Kids Parent Advisory Board. So enough from me. Let me turn it over to Karen.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol. It's really great to be here. And, you know, I just see so many opportunities for collaboration between LiveWell and Action for Healthy Kids. So it is great to spend some time talking with everyone. So just on your screen, I always like to put a picture just so folks have an idea of who's talking. It can be really strange just to hear this voice coming out over the computer. And I also wanted to be sure that folks had a little bit of information about LiveWell Colorado if you aren't familiar with our work. But I will go ahead and just jump right into the, let's see, sorry. There we go, into the content for today's webinar. So I'm just going to start with an overview of Colorado's legislative session and discuss potential ways to engage, just to make sure we're sort of all on the same page. There's a lot of content here, and I may not get to everything, but some of the slides hopefully can be used as a reference, so you can always look back at it, and then you can also, of course, always contact me for more information. So we'll start with that, and then I'll talk about some specific statewide policy issues that may be of interest, as well as some specific federal policy issues that may be of interest, and then we'll also have some space for questions as well. Okay, so Colorado, welcome to our state. We were just talking about how we have some unique issues here in terms of how legislation is made and policy work. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context, about our state, but really to echo what Carol was saying. I think there's so many opportunities to get to know your policymakers in Colorado, and I can't stress how important it is enough to build relationships. We do have a working legislature, and a lot of our senators and representatives have other jobs and are very active in their communities. I'm sure many of you have relationships with them. So I just want to sort of give that pitch that really building those relationships can make a huge difference long-term with policy work. Just so folks probably know this, but just to reiterate, we are in the midst of the 2016 legislative session now. It convenes on January 13th, and it's set to adjourn on May 11th. So there's really opportunities year-round for engaging with your legislators, but I would say during the session, it can look a little bit different. So I really recommend for folks to get to know their legislators, go to their town hall meetings. A lot of them do, coffees and get-togethers with their constituents. There's a lot of opportunities to invite them to your schools, and have tours and that sort of thing. But doing work in district is probably better received after May 11th, but before January. However, during the session, I think there's some great opportunities with different Day at the Capitol events to engage, and we'll talk some more about that later as well. So just so folks know, my slides got out of order a little bit. Sorry about that. Just so folks know, I wanted to give a little bit of context about this year's legislative session in particular. So this is my 7th year doing policy work with the Colorado legislature, and I will say there's a bit of doom and gloom in the air. I haven't seen quite this level of frankly, that doom and gloom in my previous 7 years doing this work down there, and I think some of it is this is an election year, so folks are pretty tightly controlled on what they can say and what they can do, and they're a little hesitant to cross party lines because they want to be real careful about what can be used with an upcoming election. It's an intensely partisan climate. Our House and Senate are controlled by different parties, and there is a very tight budget this year. So sort of all those factors that are making people a little grumpy. But I still think there's some really great opportunities for engagement and advocacy. I just wanted to give that sort of context because, this may not be the year where everyone is celebrating in the streets about the huge achievements that were made, and that's universal across all issue areas. So this is really a reference slide, but I really encourage everyone to spend some time on the Colorado General Assembly website. It actually has a wealth of information on it, so you have the website there. So from this website, you really kind of have to dig around and just play around and all of that with it, but you can get a lot of information. You can read bills, you can see what legislation your representatives and senators are working on, you can learn when bills are scheduled for hearings, and you can also listen to hearings as well as the full House and Senate debate issues. So if it's the type of thing that you have time for, it's amazing what you can get from that. So we are actually going to launch a poll. We're going to try and make this a little bit more interactive and find out a little bit about the type of work that you all have done. So you guys should have a poll that you can see. It doesn't look like anybody has voted yet, but you can click. So what we want to know is, have you ever listened to a hearing, attended a hearing, testified at a hearing? Maybe you wanted to, but you haven't been able, or did you maybe not know that you could do these things? So it looks like, yeah, you guys might need to look on your control panel to see if, okay, a couple people have voted now. So far, a few people have said actually everyone has said they either wanted to, but they weren't able, or they didn't know that they could. So we'll give it just like another second or two. Does anybody else go ahead and cast your vote and let us know? We would love to hear about your level of engagement. Okay, so we'll close that, and we can share it. So, okay, so and then so you guys can see that too. It's a 50-50 split, and it looks like this is an area where folks have some opportunities to grow and learn in, and it's an area. One of my favorite parts of policy work is helping people get to a place where they feel ready to testify at a hearing. They're all public. So that is great. I would love to be able to work with some folks to get you down to the Capitol telling your stories. Okay, so we're going to keep moving. So this is just a screenshot of a bill, and I just wanted to put it up there just so you have it for information, sort of on down the road for doing legislative advocacy. This is just like the first page of a bill, and there's actually a ton of information that this tells you. It tells you the bill number so you can sort of track its status. The status is in the top right corner, so this one was just introduced, but it could also indicate if it's gone through different committees and where it's at in the process. You have the title, you have your sponsors, you have the committee that it was assigned to, and then a summary of what it will do. So the committee of assignment, I think, is actually really important. So I'm going to talk about a bill that I'm working on with LiveWell right now. And where it's assigned, it's sometimes a little bit odd which committee hears a bill. Sometimes it literally has to do with how busy they are and how many are on the calendar. So the bill I'm working on, for example, could go to Health and Human Services, or it could go to the Ag Committee. So once I know that really helps me target the message, because the way I would talk to folks who have ag expertise versus health expertise is a little bit different. So that can be really important to know what committee it's going to, who sits on that committee, and then, what is their background and interests, and why are they on that particular committee. So I'm not going to spend any time on this, but this is just a slide that gives some tips about how to read legislation, because sometimes it's like its own language. So that can be really helpful if there's a particular bill that you're interested in. And then just so folks, have this information too about the legislative process here in Colorado, a bill has to pass through both the House and the Senate, and it'll start in a committee, and that's all where public testimony is taken, and anybody can testify. Then it'll sometimes be sent to an appropriations committee if there's funding needed, and then it goes to the full House and Senate floor for votes, and then it goes to the governor, who will either sign or veto it. So that's just the background that I wanted to give folks about the legislative process. But now I think it'd be great just to dive into some specific things that are going on this legislative session in particular. Okay, so what I just mentioned, so LiveWell Colorado is working on a policy proposal. It isn't school related, but it is certainly intended to help increase access to fresh fruits and vegetables. So this is a proposal that we're working on to increase state coordination to make sure that statewide folks who are receiving SNAP, so food stamps or WIC, the Women, Infant, and Children vouchers, are able to use those at a variety of locations. We have some good examples of a few farmers markets around the state, a few produce stands, but by no means do we have a statewide sort of scaled out approach to make sure that maybe community supported agriculture projects, programs, flea markets, and other innovative markets are able to accept those payment mechanisms. So this is something that we're working on to try and get more staff support and to put some of this work within the Department of Agriculture to make sure that farmers can accept many different payment options, and that people who really need access to fruits and vegetables can use food stamps to pay for them. So that's something that we're working on right now that I just wanted to put on people's radars. It hasn't been introduced yet, and that's just because we're doing a lot of stakeholder work with different state agencies. But if that's a topic you're interested in, certainly let me know, and I'd love to keep you looped in about its progress. So the next The next policy issue I wanted to mention that's currently going on right now are some slight changes to the state's breakfast after the bell statute. So this is another policy proposal that hasn't been introduced yet either, and I think why we're seeing bills sort of get rolled out slowly has to do with some of that doom and gloom forecast that I started with, just that when it is such a tense climate down there, policy advocates and folks doing this work want to make sure that they have done all their stakeholder work on the front end, and that everybody's really ready to go in on the same page. So this bill hasn't come forward yet. It's being closely worked on between Hunger Free Colorado and the Colorado School Nutrition Association. So just to give a little bit of background, Breakfast After the Bell is part of the school breakfast program, which is a federally funded program to provide children with breakfast at school. And of course, I think you all are very well familiar with all the really positive outcomes and research about student success. Of course, it's very intuitive that kids need to have healthy, nutritious food to start the day to be able to succeed at school. So the way that Breakfast After the Bell is structured in Colorado, it's a little bit confusing, but right now, schools with 70% or more qualifying students must provide universal sort of breakfast after the bell, and that can be structured in different ways. There are some exemptions for small rural districts that have 1,000 students or less. And a lot of this is tied to a federal and state reimbursement system to make sure that schools are covered for costs in districts. So the 2016 policy proposal is around really schools looking at the financial constraints that they have currently while still offering breakfast once the school bell has rang for all students. Schools have asked for some flexibility when there is between 70 and 80% free and reduced lunch rate, having the option at the district's discretion to be able to charge students who are not eligible for free and reduced meals to help recoup some of the school's costs for these programs. So that's a proposal that we've heard is coming. I think that one thing that is important to us and important for us to know is that there's very strong federal rules to ensure that kids aren't stigmatized. So I remember when I was a kid, it was like super obvious who was getting free breakfast. They had to get there at like 5:30 in the morning to get it, and it wasn't a good system. So now there's a lot of federal rules in place to ensure that kids aren't stigmatized. So if you're using a swipe card, maybe for the kids who are paying, then you have to use the same swipe card for kids who are free. So I just wanted to put that out there, that even though this proposal is giving districts more opportunity to charge, I think that there are a lot of rules in place to make sure that it's implemented properly. So that's one thing that we want to talk with you all about and get some information from you all. So I have another poll that we're going to launch just to find out. We're really interested in how Breakfast After the Bell is working around the state. So I would just love to know what you all are seeing. Would you say that Breakfast After the Bell is working, a healthy breakfast is provided, and that healthy word is important for sure. Is it provided, but you're not sure how healthy it is? Has your school struggled with implementation? Does your school not have a program, or maybe are you not aware of the status? So if folks could just let us know where they're at with this one, I think it's just really helpful for us. Okay, so it looks like people are voting right now. About 67% of respondents have said, I don't know the status, and then 33% of respondents have said our school has struggled with implementation. So, I have to say, not to give everybody more work, but, if your school is struggling with implementation and you have a few minutes to send me an email, or we can arrange a time to talk on the phone, I would really like to learn more about what's going on in your schools and districts around Breakfast After the Bell, because it's a big program and a complex program, so we want to make sure that it's going best as it can and offer some assistance if there are ways that we can be helpful. And if nothing else, it's really important to be able to convey to legislators what we're seeing in the field, because this is a statutory mandate. There will be repeated opportunities to revisit that statute, so knowing what it's looking like on the ground is really important for moving forward. Okay. So again, as I mentioned, it's been a pretty slow rollout of legislation, and we're not seeing a ton of legislation related to healthy eating and active living this session. And I think some of that does have to do with the climate that I discussed. But last year, there was a bill, it was Senate Bill 274, which it was an attempt to repeal Colorado's minimal soda tax. So I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but Colorado does have a tax that we put on both soda and candy. It's not enough of a tax that we really think that it curbs consumption of it, but it does bring in, I think, between $17 and $18 million a year to the general fund. What was really concerning about this attempt to repeal the tax was some language in last year's bill. So some bills will have a legislative declaration to start with, and the declaration is really just there to explain sort of the philosophy behind it and the impetus and why legislators are bringing it forward. And the legislative declaration from last year, I'm happy to send it out to anyone, but there was talk in it about how drinking soda is a right that all citizens have, and drinking soda is a necessity. So it was really bizarre, strange language, totally promoting soda consumption. So that was really concerning, and feeling like that is not language that we want our legislature declaring the many wonderful components of soda. Also, not wanting to lose that revenue and feeling like it really was moving backwards, because frankly, we would like to see more taxes on soda that can curb consumption if and when that's politically viable. So anyway, all that is to say, there was conversation last year that bill would keep coming back. There's a lot of interest in it from like the bottlers, manufacturer, the bottling companies, as well as convenience stores. And convenience stores, they argue that it's tricky for them to know what is a soda, and that it's tricky because there's different payment structures for juice versus milk versus soda versus water, and that it's just really sort of a pain. It's the marketing and promoting and pricing level at the local level. So that's sort of where the argument's coming from. So anyway, if that does come back this year, then that is something that we absolutely will oppose, and would look for some allies to talk about the negative health impacts of soda consumption. Another bill that happened last year, so folks may be familiar with the Healthy Kids Colorado survey, and that is really the preeminent data source in the state of Colorado that gives us a wealth of information about students and their well-being. So it's, my old field used it around exposure to teen dating violence and that sort of thing, bullying. It is very helpful information about what kids are consuming, obesity rates. So there's continual efforts to sort of roll back that survey, I would say, and an emphasis at the legislature around parental rights, saying that parents should have to opt in their kids, that kids shouldn't, instead of an opt-out process now, that it should be an opt-in. And I think the concern is that, if it's the type of thing that a parent has to give permission for, that it just wouldn't happen due to logistics and due to time and that sort of thing. So we want to make sure that we have that data set, because it really informs a lot of policy directions in the state. So that's something that, if and when we see continual efforts to roll it back, that will work in opposition against it as well. So just a couple other legislative issues. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because they're not as directly relevant, but I did want to mention a bill that's getting just a ton of press right now, and it's that House Bill 1002 around parents being able to take work leave to attend activities at schools for their kids. So that may be something you may want to take a look at, just because it's really getting a lot of conversation right now. Another bill that we're monitoring is Senate Bill 72 to increase the maximum total amount of lease payments for BEST funding, which that is the funding stream for school construction, and we've seen a lot of those BEST dollars go to school gymnasiums, school cafeteria upgrades, that sort of thing. So we're interested in making sure that revenue stream is as strong as possible in the state. And then I just wanted to mention another bill that recently kind of came across my radar. It was House Bill 1137, and it was killed. The the official term for when a bill is killed. It's postponed indefinitely, or PI'd. You'll hear people say it was PI'd, and that's what that means. And it was a bill to put warning labels on nicotine products that don't contain tobacco. So we're not talking about packs of cigarettes. We know those already have it. But like the vape pens and a lot of other things you're seeing now, these I don't even know what they are, frankly, because I don't smoke, but of other devices that people get nicotine from, to put warning labels specifically around keeping it away from kids, because the levels of nicotine can be really toxic to children. So I think I did not follow that bill closely, but it did die in the legislature, which I thought was a little bit concerning. So I just wanted to mention those. So some other policy issues that are going on that are not legislative at this point. So last year there was legislation to try and get general fund appropriations for Safe Routes to School and Safe Routes to School funding, and that did not pass at the legislature last year. But the good news is the governor's office has worked with CDOT, the Colorado Department of Transportation, to really make sure that we have federal funds that are coming into the state that are being set aside and earmarked for Safe Routes to Schools programs in our state. So I think that was a policy success. So they have committed to, the state is committed to $10 million over the next 4 years, with the goal of helping schools, districts, and communities enable and encourage more kids to bike and walk safely. And I know you all have been very involved with Safe Routes to School efforts in the past, so I won't spend a ton of time on it, but I just wanted folks to have the list of eligible activities that are included for that funding. So certainly it can be planning, designing, construction of safe school routes, construction of facilities to assist, and then education components as well, which we know can be really valuable. So in case it's of interest, I just wanted to put a slide of this the last projects that were awarded, so folks could see if any of this happens to be in your areas, just to make sure you know what was funded and the amount of money that was given, and the number of students and schools that are affected by it. But I also am such a planner. I like to give pitches for people planning, so I just wanted to make sure that folks knew that the next call for applications will come out in August, so you really have plenty of time. They won't be due until early December, but because we do have a pretty dedicated funding stream, and $10 million over the next 4 years is significant, I just want to make sure that advocates like you all are really aware of this resource that the state is investing. One thing, there is a federal requirement that these grants do require a 20% cash match. That can often come from another grant for the match, a municipal investment. There's different ways to structure it, but that's the type of thing, I think that folks sometimes struggle with, that is good to really start planning and thinking ahead of time about the local investment to advance those projects. So moving ahead, I just wanted to talk, this is very much an exploration slide. So as folks probably know, Colorado is one of 4 states that does not have a PE mandate. We do have some language from legislation, I think it was House Bill 2013-1069 around physical activity, but I think there are some concerns that it wasn't, it's not as robust as it could be. There's still a lot of discretion, and it's not really being tracked or data collected on what implementation or enforcement looks like at the state level. So I think in general, there's concern that the state really could be doing more in terms of physical education opportunities for kids. So something that LiveWell Colorado is exploring, in 2016, maybe not, but at some point a PE ballot measure. So a ballot measure, that is where a policy issue goes directly to the voters. It doesn't go through the legislature, and it's where voters can approve it. And there's a lot of rules, a lot of signatures that are required to even get something on the ballot. So it's a complicated process, but what we're looking at is there a way to sort of move the needle on PE in schools by looking at our school and district performance measures? Because our schools and districts, it really comes down to sort of their grade and how they're doing, and that the performance measures in the district framework and school framework is very focused on academic achievement only. So looking at, are there ways to essentially incentivize, reward, and encourage schools to give some points on the framework, some performance framework points for providing physical education and physical activity to students. And then because we don't have any sort of mandatory data collection around any of this to know sort of baseline where our schools are, having a component of that too, that there would be a mandatory sort of data reporting about what does this actually look like, is this effective PE happening, and that to be a part of the accountability framework. So it's really a policy concept right now. Folks at LiveWell are having conversations with stakeholders about this work. And just getting a sense of, is this something that we think would help and help really advance PE in schools? So for this issue in particular, I would really ask you, if it's something that you're interested in, if you have thoughts or ideas or opinions about working within the school and district performance framework, barriers maybe to schools and districts to being able to seek points in this area. I think that's all really valuable feedback, especially since this is something that's in very initial stages of policy development. So I wanted to be sure to mention it. So that was a lot of me talking. So we just wanted to open up, just take a few minutes for some questions. So I believe you all can type a question in your question box. So I'm happy to go back over anything or provide more details. So any questions that folks have?
So Karen, I'll ask one. You mentioned House Bill 1069 on physical activity. Could you explain, I mean, that's related to physical activity, and you looks like you guys are doing something about PE. Could you just maybe kind of explain the differences there and a little bit more about that? Like how maybe 1069, like what that bill covered? Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah, thanks. I don't have the bill in front of me, so I don't want to go too into the weeds with it. It was much broader than PE, that's for sure. It was physical activity and looking at the various ways kids can get physical activity. So it included sort of field trips and, brain breaks, all of which are very, very good. But it certainly wasn't around actual PE. So I think that there was that distinction with it. And then I think what we run into in Colorado, we're such a local control state that sort of enforcement and training and technical assistance and implementation all comes down to the district level in Colorado. The state just doesn't have that level of involvement in making sure that it's working the way it was intended. So I would say, I think, and I would actually, I'm going to send out that bill to everyone just as a supplemental material so you guys can take a look at it, and you can sort of practice that slide that talks about how to read legislation. But, I think that there really is concern that it has great philosophy behind it. It certainly encourages schools to make sure that kids are getting the appropriate amount of, recess and physical activity throughout the school day. But I think there's concerns that it wasn't binding, and there's really no way to enforce it or even make sure that we have a district-wide approach to it. So that would be, that would be sort of my initial thoughts on it. But I'd love to send out the legislation to everyone afterwards so you all can take a look at it, because it certainly is current law.
Great, thanks, Karen. We don't have any other questions right now, but definitely do type them in, and because Karen loves questions, and she wants to help us all become better advocates. So please answer, or please type in your questions. Okay, back to you, Karen.
Thanks. So I'm going to switch a little bit now to what's happening at the federal level, because I think even though it feels even further removed from Colorado and even further outside of our abilities to engage in advocacy, I actually think it's like a deceptive barrier. And what happens at the federal level has huge implications at the state level. And I actually have seen some great sort of community-based advocacy on behalf of federal policy. So I think it's really important. It's an important piece of all of this. So something that there's a lot of conversation about currently is the Every Student Succeeds Act. So that was essentially the reauthorization of No Child Left Behind. It was a huge education policy, package, of which I will fully say I have not tracked and followed all the implications of it. But what I am really interested in are the components of that large federal package that really can influence school wellness and kids' wellness and health and physical activity. So just so folks know, that was signed into law December 10th, so just a few months ago. And the rules, sometimes you'll have, legislation passed, but then there still has to be a rulemaking process to really give the details of what it's going to look like. So some of the rules and regulations, so promulgating rules is what it's called, hasn't happened yet. So there's still a lot to be determined. But what did pass in the package is that, so for school districts that receive $30,000 or more in federal funds annually, they have to use, there's money that is, it is, a mandate that they, of those federal dollars schools are getting, they have to use 20% of it for activities that support a well-rounded education. And then another 20% for activities to support safe and healthy students. So that's a pretty big policy shift that I wanted to touch on. So in No Child Left Behind, the term was core academic subjects, and it was very focused on, what you would imagine, which is all hugely important, the English, the math, the science, the writing, reading, that sort of thing. So of course we're not wanting to discount from those, but we do know that when kids are healthy and they have opportunities for physical education and physical activity, they oftentimes perform better in those core academic subjects. And certainly we know that academic success can really be tied to health and nutrition and hunger and many, many factors. So we see a strong connection. And the good thing is with this reauthorization of this legislation, the term has now changed to well-rounded education that for the first time includes health and physical education. So I think that's exciting, and I think that's progress. And I think there's opportunities there, especially since there's money that has to be earmarked for these activities. So at the federal level, there is sort of a list that was constructed by the U.S. Department of Education that provided examples of what that 20% funding could look like. So, of course, it was a long list, and I didn't put it all here, but I just wanted to give some examples because it's broad. It was everything from activities that promote volunteerism and community engagement, drug and violence prevention activities, school-based mental health services, anti-bullying stuff, conflict resolution, all of which is very important. But there's certainly listed as examples of how schools could spend those dollars, those federal dollars, or how they must, were programs or activities that integrate health and safety practices into school or athletic programs. So that's pretty vague, but I think it's important to know that this is sort of new funding that has to be spent in this broad area of well-rounded, safe, and healthy. So I think that that's just something for all of us to know, and I think the Action for Healthy Kids is going to be providing some ongoing trainings around district policy, which I would imagine that this possibly, there could be more information could come up because really this is going to be a district level decision. So my understanding about the process is that each local education agency, which those are our school districts, are expected to put together an application that goes to the state Department of Ed about how those dollars are going to be spent in their district. Like, what are the priorities for those health, safety, well-rounded education priorities? And it says in the legislation that there has to be sort of the stakeholder process in which parents, teachers, principals, school leaders, students, community-based organizations are included in that and articulating what the district's policies are for health and wellness. So I really, this is all new and emerging. So this is really about the extent of the information that has currently been released. And I check in with our federal lobbyists quite often just for updates. And this is really all that's been provided at this point. But I think it's something for all of us to really be aware of because I really do think there's advocacy opportunities. It's built into the law that parents need to be consulted about this, and it's built in to the law that funding needs to go towards towards health and wellness, even though it is a broad explanation of what that could be. So I just want that to be on everybody's radars, and hopefully it's something we'll be able to dive in deeper with. So the ESSA that I just talked about, that is passed, but we're still seeing rules and regulations. So folks may be familiar with the Child Nutrition Act. This is something that is just at the beginning stages of, so it has not passed yet. It has sort of been renamed. It was the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010. Now it's being reauthorized, and it's the Improving Child Nutrition Integrity and Access Act of 2016. And it is a big federal package, once again, that has all of our, school meal programs, the WIC program, just a huge array of federal sort of kids school nutrition is all looped under this big umbrella. The summary is about 13 pages, and that's just the summary. So there's a lot in it. So the version that folks are looking at right now, it passed the Senate Agriculture Committee. So that's as far as it's gone in the process. And if you remember from my earlier slide in Colorado, about how it has to go through, both House and Senate committees and appropriations and then full vote, and then it goes to the governor. At the federal level, it's a little different, but it's pretty much the same. There's differences, but at the end of the day, it has to get through House, Senate, both committees, both full votes, both appropriations, and then it's signed or vetoed by the president. So this has only been through one Senate Ag Committee, and Senator Michael Bennet from Colorado does sit on that committee, so he's a great ally with some of this. And we're looking forward to see where it goes, and I think there are really important pieces of advocacy within this as well. So just so folks know, the nutrition requirements is a piece that is, of course, on our radar. So there have been some, again, I think they were closely negotiated compromises, but generally folks don't see them as a significant rollback. So it is a slight reduction in the whole grain requirement, and then it gives schools 2 additional years to meet the sodium reduction requirements. So far that's what's been proposed, and I think people feel like that's livable, although I'm sure not everyone is thrilled, but considering there's been a lot of sort of controversy around them, I think people felt like it was a okay starting place. Another piece that I just want to mention, because Senator Bennet in Colorado has really championed it, and I think it's really important policy, is looking at hunger and food insecurity for kids when school is not in session. So we know that for many kids, school is the place that they get a huge amount of their calories. It's where they get their food through both school breakfast and school lunch programs. And we know that when kids aren't in school, whether that's for a holiday break or summer vacation, oftentimes the family is not able to subsidize, and they're not eating at the same amounts, which is really which is something that really needs to be looked at in our country. So Senator Bennet has been working on a proposal. Obviously, these things have to be, it's based on a pilot. They're looking at sort of a scaling and approach. So obviously it's not something that every kid would be able to benefit from, but we think it's definite movement in the right direction. That kids would be able to get an electronic benefit card. So, an EBT card, which is what food stamps is administered on, over the summer, to be able to give some extra support for summer meals for in rural and other high needs areas. So I believe the proposal was for the card to give about $30 a month on it. So clearly this isn't going to solve hunger, but it's to help supplement families with nutrition needs when kids aren't in school. So that's another component that's being looked at. What I don't have on the slide, another piece that we're really excited about with this piece of legislation is some funding that's really earmarked for school kitchen modernization and infrastructure. It is very hard for schools to do scratch cooking with fresh and wholesome ingredients if they do not have the proper equipment, and that can be anything from dull knives to ovens that are from the 1950s that aren't even calibrated correctly, so the food is frozen. There has to be the right kitchen infrastructure to be even able to create and prepare healthy meals. So there is some funding specifically for that to help upgrade school kitchens. So that's another component of it that we like. And then what's really exciting is the expanded farm to school provision. So I believe right now the USDA provides about $5 million a year for farm to school efforts, for training, technical assistance, really getting on the ground and helping people figure out how to best set up these programs. The funding is doubled in this proposal. So there certainly is an expansion of farm to school, which we're really excited about as well. So that's a very, sort of high-level overview of a big package of legislation. But like I said, it's early on, and there's a lot of components of it that I think really make a difference to the work that you all are doing with Action for Healthy Kids. And I really do think that there are advocacy opportunities. I actually met with Congressman Kaufman's chief of staff yesterday about child nutrition reauthorization, and there is so much interest. He talked about how schools in his district do these sort of projects with kids where it's like write a letter to your congressman. And when he said when we get letters from kids, they are overwhelmingly about school food, about the quality, about the time they have to eat it, about what's being offered. I mean, he's like, that is the one issue we hear about, which I thought was really fascinating. So that's my pitch on CNR. And I just want to say, kind of to echo what we started with, Carol's totally right. Our legislators, I mean, I hate to say that they're overwhelmed, but they are working on so many issues across the board, every topic you could imagine. And what they are looking for is hearing from their constituents about how this directly affects people in their districts. And they're looking for compelling stories that they'll remember, and that'll really stick with them when it comes time to vote. So I really encourage all of you to tell your stories, because I've seen them make a difference time and time again. So I just want to sort of start wrapping up with some ways to get involved. So LiveWell Colorado does do an annual day at the Capitol, and it's an opportunity to come in and meet with your legislators, and then network with some other sort of HEAL advocates. This year we're doing a little bit bigger of an approach that we've done in the past. It's actually going to be sort of 2 days of events. On March 8th, we're doing like a half-day policy training that'll be in Denver. Folks can come, in person, and we'll really talk through specific policy proposals and a little bit more advanced advocacy, what to do when you get your 3 minutes with your legislator. And then the day after, so Wednesday, March 9th, folks are setting up meetings with their legislators. If you want like a LiveWell staff person to go with you, that's something we can provide. But then what we're hoping folks will show up for as well is we're going to be providing lunch at the Capitol from 11:30 to 12 and inviting legislators to come. It's very casual lunch. It's the only way they let you do it. It's literally standing in a hallway, nothing fancy. And then we're going to have a programmed event from noon to 1 where we're inviting legislators, and we have speakers coming that we're really showing what this work looks like around the state, and different examples of community involvement and community changes and shifts around healthy eating and physical activity. So I think it's going to be a really neat event. Folks can join us for all 2 days. They can join us for a part of it where they just show up for the lunch or they just show up for the event. So there's a lot of flexibility of it. So you guys have the invite up there to the lunch and the program we're doing, and then the contact information for more information. That you're certainly welcome to join us for any or all of it, and we'd love to help encourage folks in the area of advocacy. Another day at the Capitol event that some partners are doing, just in case you're not available on the March 9th, March 16th is another example. Colorado Children's Campaign, Clayton Early Learning, and Children's Hospital Colorado do their annual Speak Up for Kids Day, and that also involves opportunities to network and meet with legislators and tell your story. So you have the link if that's a better time and place for you. Wanted to give a couple different opportunities. And then in general, there's just a lot of ways to really build capacity in this area. And I am not exaggerating when I say that I've seen folks who have never engaged in this type of work, but come to the Capitol and tell their story, and I've seen it change minds, I've seen it change votes. So I know it works, and it's something that my favorite part of this work is really helping people get to the place where they feel like they can be policy advocates. So yeah, I just have to make the pitch that hearings are public. You can listen online. You can also go down to the Capitol and just like sit in the back of the room and observe it and get a feel for it before you say or do anything. But you certainly, it is your right as a citizen to testify and go on public record about what you think. You know, I also really encourage people to build those relationships within all three areas, your local, state, and federal elected officials. You know, sign up for just even getting on their email distribution list to find out when they're having town halls or when they're doing coffee chats can be great opportunities. LiveWell has launched a public policy committee. And really the intention is for folks around the state to be able to share with us what's happening on the ground and help inform how and when and where we get involved. So that we're having monthly meetings for those. You can contact me for more information. All of the meetings are accessible via conference call, and no public policy experience is needed. You know, it's really something that is set up to be accessible so that we can share what's going on and provide these types of updates, but also really listen and learn and hear how you all think it will affect your district or your community. Please follow us on social media. Our social media, we're really more intentionally using it to promote policy advocacy opportunities. I think in the past it you know, had more you know, recipes and stories and that sort of thing, which is great, but we have so many folks that follow us on social media, and it's a great place to look for advocacy action alerts. So keep an eye out for that. And then you can sign up to get our action alerts by going to our website. It's livewellcolorado.org /take-action /. So then you can get some sort of direct information from us as well. So that is my contact information. You know, I love connecting with people around this work, so please send me an email, give me a call, and I'd love to be able to provide more information or cover any gaps or that sort of thing. But I think we do have a few minutes, so we can open up to some more questions.
Great, Karen. So one question. Will we get the presentation? And yes, all of these links, we'll send a follow-up email in the next 2 to 3 days, and there will be links to all the information, both in the body of the email, you know, to LiveWell, to Action for Healthy Kids, and to all the different things that Karen mentioned. Plus, we'll also give you a PDF version of slides, so you can expect that. So we do have a couple of questions for Karen. One, why is the PE mandate a ballot measure and not going through the legislator? What is the difference? And then there's one more after that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. You know, so I will say that it's not definitely a ballot measure yet. It's still something we're exploring. But the thought behind, I mean, honestly, we don't think it will be as viable through the legislature. And some of that has to do with sort of interest groups, the Colorado Association of School Boards, Colorado Association of School Executives. Some of those groups typically oppose any type of sort of new mandates, and that's sometimes kind of this blanket thing. And I think that it is important to really look at their what they're saying about this. And the reality is that Colorado has a pretty complicated tax structure that disadvantages our schools, and our schools oftentimes don't have the financial resources to be able to do this. So sometimes the mantra from the school community is no new mandates, no new mandates, no new mandates. And, you know, coming from the field I was in before, I worked really closely on school violence issues is the one area of school policy that I've spent more time. And, you know, in a state like Colorado where we've seen a lot of school violence issues, unfortunately, it's not that there's not the will to do it, but sort of this, we don't have the financial resources or the ability to create new jobs, roles, responsibilities, mandates, tracking. So sort of this no new mandates mantra that you hear, down at the Capitol a lot. At the end of the day, when there's polling done on this, where the general, so you all probably, I get these calls where it's like these public research firms and they ask you all these questions. The polling that has been done on this is really pretty overwhelming. Parents want this. It polls very, very high that parents want to see PE in their kids' school. They get it that their children need PE for many reasons. So we just, what we're exploring is whether this would fare better if it just went to the voters instead of getting sort of all the lobbyists and interest groups, if it's a more effective approach. A ballot measure is more complicated and it's more expensive. So there's a lot of considerations, and it's really evolving right now. So that's why I think it would really behoove LiveWell to get some feedback from folks like you all.
Great, thanks for that clarification. Also, a question about child nutrition reauthorization. So can you talk about kind of what the next steps are? I mean, so it's under consideration, what happens next, and kind of what's the general process for the reauthorization just in general?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that that everyone's asking, even legislators at the federal level. So like as I mentioned, it did pass that Senate committee. There will be, sort of a fiscal note or appropriation with it, so it has to go through the whole sort of budget process at the federal level, and there has to be a House version introduced. So none of that has happened yet. It's moving slow. My understanding, I think there is a commitment from this administration to get it done. Frankly, while President Obama is in office still, because this is an issue that's been important to his administration. It certainly has been important to the First Lady, Michelle Obama. So I think from what I'm hearing, the goal is, to get it done, before the end of the year. But I can't say, and I just met with, as I mentioned, Congressman Kaufman's office yesterday, and they were asking the same question, like, when do we think a House version's coming? What's going on with this? So there's not a ton of information, and it's one of those things where I would just say to watch our social media, sign up for action alerts, and as soon as we know more about it advancing in the Senate as well as the introduction of a House version, we'll be sure to let everybody know.
Great. And so then would you say, so then in the meantime, things just operate under the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, right, until it gets passed? Okay. All right. Sometimes that's a little confusing. Do we have the school nutrition program or not? But I guess we do until something new gets passed. Great. Well, that is all of our questions, and that is all of our time today. We just can't thank you enough, Karen, for all of the incredible information that you've given, and then what we'll send out to will be a great resource to kind of go back and review everything as well. So on behalf of Action for Healthy Kids and our Parent Advisory Board, you can see on the screen, we'd also love for you to join us on Facebook. We really do a lot of success stories. We give tips, resources, all kind of related to how to improve that school nutrition and physical activity environment in your own school, and give you a lot of project ideas. So please check us out, and of course check out LiveWell as well, and we hope you take advantage of some of these opportunities. And I'm sure I can say with Karen that we're looking forward to seeing you at those advocacy days, aren't we, Karen? Hope to see you there. Thanks so much, and have a great rest of your day.